Hello and welcome to DM Rob G Reviews. Seeing as American Dad is looking to become a staple of my channel, just as it was a staple during my college years, I am enjoying the way I disseminate these conservative values that have sort of spread through our country and seem to be gaining some traction. But there's something about one episode in particular that has always bugged me. Now, I know it's not going to be a lot, but it's important for me to get out what I can. See, as American Dad aged, its writing staff and its production staff has adapted the show to different societal values. One of these changes involves acknowledgement of different gender identities. Now, what American Dad absolutely fails at is the examination of these genders. Let me explain. In February of 2015, an episode called LGB Steve aired. This episode revolves around Haley joining a roller derby team. However, Haley sucks at rollerblading while Steve is really good. But since it's an all-women's roller derby team, Steve is forced to pretend to be a woman. This brings Steve to question his identity after wearing women's clothes and being part of women's team. Now, after this, there is a 3-minute examination of Steve examining his own identity with the help of Roger. There are other episodes that deal with gender identity and physical identity to an extent. There is season 1's helping. Stan is so afraid of Steve not being popular, even as he lives vicariously through his son. Stan injects his son with steroids. These steroids wind up giving Steve breasts. Rest of the episode revolving around Steve being taken advantage of by horny teenage boys. And Stan needs to come to his rescue by taking the triple dose. Then season 9 is an episode called Stan Goes on the Pill. Stan takes a pill called estrocillin because he can't be bothered to actually treat women as an equal. Now, it winds up turning him into a woman and is forced to spend the entirety of the episode adapting to life as a woman until a cure is found. Now, all these episodes have the standard critique of conservative arrogance that I've come to expect from American Dad. Stan's arrogance and unwillingness to look weak or show any sort of compassion or courtesy to other people is what leads him to take the estrocillin, for example. His unwillingness to have his son look weak is what giving Steve his breasts. But there's something that no one outside the trans community really knows how to deal with or write, and that is gender dysphoria. The Mayo Clinic describes gender dysphoria as severe distress relating to the perceived identity of one's gender and their assigned gender at birth. Now, for now, let's start with Steve getting a pair of breasts and helping Candace. Now, the pair actually grow overnight. Steve's identity is based off of him not having breasts for the 14.5 years of his life. Suddenly, he gets a pair. Now, his physical identity is based on the lack of breasts, but now that he has them, his brain has to adapt, since it's been programmed day in and day out to register as not having breasts. Imagine that if you were there to happen to you. One day you are sitting there and then suddenly, boobs. Now, I can explain what it's like from my perspective. I am gender fluid. There are times when I feel more feminine, and there are times when I feel more masculine. Most of the time, I feel more masculine than feminine. I can get gender dysphoria, but not as badly as some of my peers have it. Now, for me, thankfully, I have what are called breast forms. They help me adapt to when I feel more feminine or masculine. Basically, I've got a dual operating system. And from personal knowledge, dysphoria can absolutely make someone emotionally vulnerable. It can directly affect self-esteem. It can affect basically your entire life. An easier example to understand gender dysphoria will be in the episode Stan Goes on the Pill. Stan changes his gender completely, but adapts. Now, normally, this change would create a massive amount of gender dysphoria. Realistically, you are who you are because of the choices you made yesterday, the week before, the month before, the year before, the decade before, the 2 decades before. Your identity is made up out of all these memories. What Stan does is suddenly change his memories completely. You know how when you look back at an event that happened a year ago, you can kind of tell the majority of the details, but sometimes the finer details go away? Imagine changing into a different gender. Who you are is basically a sum event of every other memory. Now here it is, a completely different answer from the day before, from the week before, and you get the idea. So what's going to end up happening is these memories suddenly don't match of who you were then who you are now. Yes, American Dad goes through this quickly, and honestly, given the fact that I can wear these comfortably, I would probably have an easier time adapting too. But at the same time, Stan bases his gender identity off of who he was as a kid, as a young adult, as an adult. who he is now. He has to ask himself who he is now with a completely different body than he was yesterday. This actually happens a lot about once a week on Ask Transgender. We'll get a question that's something like, I'm 30 years old and I realize I might not be the gender I was born with. What do I do? Stan's going to be on that same subreddit asking that same question. And the answer is never easy. Never easy, because his brain is going to look at his body and say, hey, this isn't right from the day before, or the week before, or the year before, the decade before. Something is wrong here. And the answer is never easy. It can take months or years to find an answer. Now, the second issue is the fact that Stan's identity relies on his masculinity. It is a source of his arrogance, his bravado, and causes nearly every of the show's plotlines. Quite frankly, an awful large part of his identity and personality disappeared overnight. If we think that Esther itself was able to change Stan's gender identity, then there needs to be time to adapt to his new identity. Hell, we can even see that he and Francine are having marriage issues because of it. That itself can't be easy under the most normal circumstances. Here he is in a brand new body, and he has to figure out who he is right now. He probably won't be, if this body continues, he won't be married for long. Now, it's good that his family accepts him. That is great. Most of the problems in this episode relate to him having just being changed into a woman, Bullock's chasing him, his marriage problems. This results in emotional vulnerability that Bullock takes advantage of. Quite frankly, with some of the trans people that have been victims of chasers, and a few of the chasers I picked up on, they would absolutely prey on that emotional vulnerability. Now, some acknowledgement would have been nice, but I get why they couldn't do it. Or rather, they didn't want to do it, and quite frankly, if they are uncomfortable writing dysphoria like that, because it would either make the episode too dark, or they would have inexperience writing it, I'm fine leaving it be. But this all brings us to LGB Steve from season 10. When it first came out, I can remember people saying how trans positive it actually was. But looking at it now with what I know, for an episode that people proclaim to be about trans issues, it really falls flat. Now, it's good that Steve decides he wants to look at his gender identity and wants to be trans. That's completely normal. Remember how I mentioned dysphoria before? Here's the thing. You don't have to have dysphoria to be trans. In this episode, Steve experiences what is known as gender euphoria, or that is happiness and joy at the expressed gender, like these. These make me feel better. This is a gender euphoria. When I feel feminine and I put these on, I feel more comfortable in my body than I was 10 minutes before. That's gender euphoria. Now, given Steve's reaction when he dresses up as a woman, that's definitely gender euphoria. He enjoys how he looks. He enjoys the confidence boost. The biggest problem comes afterwards when Steve wants to find out whether or not he's really male or female. I'm just going to say this outright, but there's absolutely positively no reason Steve can't be a woman without a penis. Or as I call it, girl dick. See, Steve is comfortable in his body as it is. His hardware matches his software, basically. He's comfortable with that. That's fine. He is euphoric in a dress. That is also fine. I mean, hell, I've got a couple of dresses in there right now. I mean, I just won't wear them right now because, I'm on camera and it shows the boobs a bit, and the boobs actually are kind of low quality, and I really don't want to put you all through that. If Steve is comfortable in his own body, there's no need for hormone replacement therapy. There's no need to cut his dick off with a turkey slicer. In fact, there's no reason to do anything at all except accept Steve for who he is. And Steve, Haley, and Roger were correct in putting in the time to think about it, but they were incorrect in deciding that he must be male or female. His body must match that gender. No, there's more than one gender. The way Steve decides that he's a boy is completely wrong as well. He decides to become a boy after he finds a shampoo bottle sexually attractive, which I will admit, I found that funny. But it's also wrong. Okay, in this episode, Steve dates Devin. I'm Devin! Meaning that his attraction to a sexy woman shaped shampoo bottle is really kind of incidental. That shouldn't be any kind of indication of gender at all. There are trans women who are lesbians, or transbians, as it were. There are trans men who go after women. There are trans men who go after men. There are trans women who go after males. There are trans women who go after other trans men. Trans women, it really is a spectrum. Steve is perfectly fine expressing himself as a masculine person wearing women's clothing. I know several people like that. There's several dresses in my closet right now that these are actually really rather low quality breast forms. I don't want to put you through that. Now, with that being said, it could be that Steve is gender fluid. It could be that Steve just likes to wear dresses. Or it might be that Steve doesn't want any of his secondary characteristics. He might want them later on in life. That's his choice to make. He has all the time in the world to figure that out. It's still even possible that Steve won't do anything at all to his body and just wears a dress every once in a while. And it certainly works for Roger. American Dad had a chance to be something really special here, and they blew it hard. Some of the trans journey is here, and the societal norms speak of acceptance in the American Dad world, and acknowledgement that there is more than one gender in a different episode at a different time. Not this one, that would have been nice. But no. There's even happiness, there's even gender euphoria, which, I don't see portrayed anywhere. It's usually gender dysphoria, and that tends to be portrayed rather badly. I mean, most shows aren't going to do any of those correctly, much less all at once. And thankfully, it shows that there are people who will accept Steve for who he is no matter what. No matter what his gender identity is, and we need that message. And I want to point something else out. In Helping Hand, Steve becomes a victim of what many trans people have become a victim of: chasers. A chaser is a person who pursues a trans person as a sexual conquest and not as a person. They tend to treat trans people as more objects, fetishes, than actual people. Though I will admit, in this case, it isn't because Steve is trans. It's because Steve has boobs, and this episode has a statement on the masculine brain becoming obsessed with boobs. But the basic framework is still there, and I count it as Vance being a chaser. Do you see how the minute Stan shows up with his triple dose of steroids? Instantly, Vince Chung and his friends all flock to Stan while Steve is shoved to the side. That is basically what ends up happening with the chaser. The trans person in question is treated as more of an object and not a person. And considering that this video is about trans issues in American Dad, I felt I should mention it. But with its successes, there's more than its share of failure. For example, any emotional vulnerability is never covered. It's once through the Family Guy thing of acting like they're progressive, but really they don't spend enough time to actually examine an issue. For something this serious, they would probably need to make it a multi-episode arc. Yes, it could probably be done, but the entire 20-minute episode needs to be devoted to that, and I don't think a lot of people have the patience for that. Steve doesn't need to change his body for him to be allowed to consider himself female. There's even genders outside the male-female binary that Steve could possibly fit into. For the love of God, I'm wearing fake boobs for my YouTube channel, and I'm comfortable with that. There's nothing wrong with that. For the love of God, be nice to my comment section. And I think that's really where this episode falls flat on its face. I get wanting to do a solution in a singular episode, but for something this serious, I think there needs to be a multi-episode arc. And quite frankly, I don't think American Dad itself has enough of a nuanced understanding of gender politics to try and do that. I might be able to, but that's from my own personal experience. I don't have the writing experience for that. I mean, look at it this way. I was part of a witchcraft server. Server itself came from a subreddit. What ended up happening is a lot of the mod staff were basically masculine trans. We had one non-binary. We had several females on staff. What ended up happening is a mod got doxxed. The subreddit mods came in and said, hey, all of you are way too masculine for this. And then proceeded to insult a lot of the upper mod staff for basically 2.5 days. The subreddit mods questioned their gender identities. It's horrific. The fact that this subreddit promises to be trans friendly, but at the same time judges you on being too masculine for their little group. A lot of people have a fantasy of what they want their world to be, and the truth is the gender non-binary is 100% part of a lot of that fantasy, and basically ruined that Discord for me. I wound up being banned from that Discord just because I can't stand for that shit, and I told everybody who asked, and finally the subreddit mods are like, we can't trust you. Bam. And part of me regrets leaving like that, but it's something I felt I had to do. This is the type of stuff trans people deal with on a daily basis. I mean, there's more to gender politics than what I think American Dad is capable of. But, I mean, that's all that I have for now. Everyone please have fun and enjoy your day. If you want to hear about that full story, I have a video on my gaming channel. Soon I'll have a series on Black history that I want to put out. I certainly hope I can do that soon. I'll try to have that one out in a week. And like normal, my Patreon and my PayPal are down below. Everyone please have fun.